Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this IANA Executive Insights session, part of our Intermodal University webinar series. Today, I'm really pleased to have Nathan Browne, who's the Vice President of Werner Logistics. I'm excited because these are my favorite sessions to do. I think we get to dig a little bit deeper into intermodal, the characters, if you will, the individuals that really make up the industry and what really brings it to life. So without further ado, I am going to ask Nate to introduce himself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and, how you came to be where you are.
Thanks, Hal. I appreciate you hosting me, and I appreciate everybody joining today. It's my pleasure to be here. So a little bit about myself. I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm a proud Brewers, Bucks, and Packers fan, like I was just sharing with Hal. I didn't, going through high school, college, I didn't know that I had a passion for transportation, logistics, or intermodal. I think that aspect of the business just found me post-college. And so, I started at Werner Enterprises really shortly, about 3 months after I finished my college education. And I've been here now for 19 and a half years. That kind of crazy to be sitting here having a conversation with you about, my career and I guess my experience in the industry. And just looking back, it feels pretty recent that I got into it. But really, if you know anything about Werner, our roots are in the truckload business. We had a single founder that started with one truck and one driver. We've morphed into a kind of a portfolio logistics company over the years. So, heavily rooted in truckload business. And then on the logistics side, it's intermodal and final mile, which is a home delivery part of our business, and brokerage. So I've had the pleasure of being on the operations side of the business. I kind of split 2 stints now in Omaha with 8 years in Chicago from 2009 to 2017. And that was more on the sales or business development side of the business that parlayed into intermodal. So Chicago is probably how I found intermodal. That's how I found my passion for intermodal, which shouldn't be a surprise to a lot of listeners. That's kind of the mecca of intermodal as it is today. But I relocated back here in 2017. And I've been in several different leadership positions within our intermodal department ever since. So, like I said, very happy to be here, very excited to talk about something that I'm very passionate about. And, I'm hopeful that I can just share part of my journey and that empowers some folks to learn a little bit and maybe do things similarly, because that is my passion. My passion is to see, folks come into this industry and succeed and help empower them to be better and have opportunity.
Thanks, Nate. That's a great kind of intro and setup to a lot of the things that I think we'll be talking about today. I know that Werner's been a longtime supporter of IANA and a longtime supporter of sharing knowledge, and truly kind of backing up that notion of an empowered industry. Is a successful industry. That notion of rising tide lifts all ships. So let's just go ahead and sort of jump in with some of your experiences from the industry. From your 20 odd years doing this, what are some of the most pivotal moments that you feel like you've experienced throughout your career, and what makes those stand out for you?
Yeah, I think if I draw, there's probably a few. When I first came into the industry, is 2003. There was a different consumer. It was, our customers operated differently from an inventory perspective. And so, there's always been the challenges that we navigate as a transportation logistics provider. We talk about the challenges of a professional driver, but, if I look back to the few things that really stick out to me over 20 years, it was when I came in, it was just learning how everything works, and the inventory levels were sky high, and supply couldn't keep up with demand. We had customers that ran inventory way differently. We had challenges with the professional driver. We had challenges across the supply chain. but it wasn't similar to what it is today. If you fast forward a few years, most folks are familiar with 2008, 2009. The bottom just fell out of the economy. We had a recession, and that really changed, I think, how our customers ran their business. They turned into a lot more just in time, running a lot leaner, just relative to inventory. And we had to adapt, especially when you're talking in terms of intermodal. There's tons of value. It's intermodal, right? It's capacity, it's carbon footprint reduction. It's certainly an alternative mode to truckload. And when customers pivot from needing something in X amount of days, maybe 6 or 7 days, down to, hey, I need it 3 or 4 because I'm running less inventory, and my customers need things faster from the time they order to the time we deliver. That's a big moment for us, right? So there was a big shift in how we did things, how we ran our business. And I always, the backdrop for me is, whether it's 2003 or 2008, 2009, we're in the service business. I mean, we're a transportation logistics company, but service is our business. And so we had to change drastically to meet our customers' needs. And that's, everything from how we engineer solutions on our drayage, how our railroad partners engineer their schedules, just meeting customer demands changed dramatically from, that early time when I came in the industry to the recession. And then the third thing I'd probably cover would be a lot more recent, right? It was the pandemic. And, the pandemic certainly brought a ton of challenges that are very, very fresh in our mind at this point, right? I mean, the supply chain challenges that we had stretched from, overseas all the way to the end customer. And it was, the variables that were involved in it touched everybody. It was the consumer, it was the warehouse, it was, our railroad partners, it was us with what we had to deal with our office associates, our professional drivers. And that just, changed. Here, a lot of that was out of our control, right? Buying habits changed and consumer habits changed. But I think when you come out of that, you learn a lot of things, and there's certainly be things that we gleaned away from that we'll do differently in the future. Like, bottom line for us, I mean, people are what run our business. You got to listen to your people. You've got to make sure that you have a plan and a strategy, and listen to your customers. And if that results in the need to change, then you do that, and you stick to your core values and you execute. So those would probably be the 3 biggest things that I would say from I started to where I am today would stick out the most.
Yeah, you hit on some really interesting themes there, and one of them is the evolution of the professional logistician. And I think your career basically tracks with it. And you kind of came in and one, the beginning of an era, and then that 2008, 2009, I think really changed a way. It took a lot of those, the lean operating practices just in time out of heavy industry or technical industry, and brought it into shoes and candles and everything. And so I think that's a really astute call out that I think will resonate with folks, is that sort of the building of the professional logistician and all of the things that folks in the industry touch to make the customer service work. And I think you're absolutely right. We've heard it so much that the expectations and the evolution of the customer's needs over the last, say 3 years of the pandemic, and it really started sort of in 2019 with the trade wars, really is just sort of, put a very, very fine focus on the fact that we all need to, as the English say, stick to our knitting, which is mind the basics, get those customer service needs met, and kind of start from there. Let's use that as a little forward, looking glass kind of question here. From that, what do you think are the most critical things that the industry needs to address in the coming, let's say 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think technology is changing the way that we do things. We always talk about, our process. And it's interesting, you mentioned lean. I go back to coming into this industry. I didn't know what lean was. And now all our managers going through a lean principle class today. That's one of the first things they do as a manager, just to learn how to drive efficiency into their business, identify inefficiency, drive more efficiency. But I think that when I talk about what's different in the next 5 to 10 years, I mean, we have a ton of technology that is positively influencing what we do in our business today, but technology doesn't fix bad process. I mean, you have to have sound, efficient process in your business, and technology enables you to be more efficient and better and meet, whether it's a driver's need in the truck, whether it's a customer's need, interfacing with you, whether it's safety, et cetera, that technology enables our process to be better. So I think, and the other thing about tech is, you have to be very meticulous and careful about how you implement it, because there's a lot of good companies doing great things, but not all of them are going to be, what your business needs and when at the right time, for example. And so I think you have to be very meticulous and cautious with it. But technology is absolutely going to help our business move forward. Whether, like I said, it's at the terminal with the driver, the office associate, and how they're more efficient with how they do their job. That's number one. We're seeing, to dovetail off tech. I mean, autonomous vehicles are certainly. How do we make the implementation of different stages of autonomy efficient for our business? I would say today it drives safety. We're not a driver out operation. I think there's going to be elements of that in the future. But for our professional drivers today, it's about safety and making their jobs safer. Alternative fuels are another thing that I think in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, we test all of that today, whether it's nat gas, liquid, LNG, CNG, hydrogen, obviously electric. We're seeing that in passenger vehicles really explode the last couple of years. And I think all that testing and how we're able to find efficiencies for our operation and our customers will be big. And then, we touched on it, the change from 2003 to today. Supply chains have changed dramatically. The consumer has changed dramatically. And, what was you order something online and it takes 5, 6, 7 days to arrive at your doorstep. The consumer wants that today or in a 24-hour period. And so our customers have to engineer their supply chains, or they will engineer their supply chains to meet those needs. And we have to be able to accommodate that. And so, that is probably those are the biggest things that are front and center for me. Now, how do we need to be different to make sure that we hit the mark? And I go back to lean principles, change management, being open to change, being open to different process, being receptive and listening to our customers and our associates, and making sure that we're engineering solutions to fit their needs. I mean, I think that's critical, regardless of what changes over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, that's terrific insight, and I think we see that a great deal. And I think that that the efficiency, that edge, really is the part where I think we have the most to gain, but we also have to pay attention the most to, as you said, those how that technology is implemented and where it gets applied. In terms of when you were getting started, what did you see as some of the most challenging parts of learning the industry, and how would you recommend, or how did you yourself go about getting smart about intermodal?
If I go back to my first couple of months, what I love, it's why I'm still doing this. I love the speed. You don't walk in and have something that's the same every single day. There's a lot of challenges they're thrown at us, and I think that can be overwhelming for somebody that is just starting out. Is just the speed and complexity of the business. Certainly I started on the truckload side. part of what we did was a ride along or shadowing a professional driver. And my first couple of weeks, I would log in and I see load numbers and truck numbers and trailer numbers and container numbers, and they just became, something that was on my screen that I didn't identify with. And then I meet, a professional driver, and some of them who I'm still great friends with today. And holy smokes, this is what you have to deal with, and what I do. Relative to preparing you for a trip with the information I'm giving you, or how I respond to you, or how we're working with a customer really impacts you this much at a facility. I think that's probably the biggest thing I learned early on. Now, how do you solve that? I mean, it's listening to the driver, right? Talking to the driver and understanding, when you go to an intermodal terminal, what are the things that you have to deal with? What are the things that are efficient? What isn't efficient? How do we fix that? And we go to a customer and, hey, here's the feedback from our driver when they come to your facility. And this is what goes well, and this doesn't go well. And it's collaboration and problem solving. But, from the time I started, it was, wow, does this industry move really, really fast? And how did I get smart? It was talking to the people that I could learn from. It's the driver, it's the customer, it's our partners, whether it's partner carrier, partner railroad, understanding how their business works, seeing things firsthand. I mean, certainly, I think networking, you don't know what you don't know. I think that's maybe a misperception that I had about how things worked in business in general. Is I came in and I thought, gosh, all these people are so smart. Am I smart enough to do this? But when we all start out in this industry, we don't know what we don't know. And I think, as a younger professional, you can be a little intimidated that, these people that are 15 or 20 years ahead of you, it's experience, right? It's networking, it's learning, it's going through things and being persistent about knowledge. And that's why they are where they are. And so I think if you have that hunger early on, and you're aggressive, I don't know if aggressive is the right word, but you're passionate about learning and knowledge, and that's how you go about getting smart. It's experience and networking and just finding out how things work.
Maybe riffing on that a little bit. What do you see are some of the most important aspects of the industry that somebody new to it should probably spend a little extra time digging into at the beginning to sort of set themselves up for success?
Yeah, I would elaborate a little bit further on some of my previous points, right? So, I think first and foremost, networking is so critical. I think a mentorship program. We have like associate resource groups here at Werner where, there's one that's young emerging leaders, and you can go and learn from people that are, 1 to 2 to 3 years into their career, and what they're learning and how they're going about that learning or that process. And it could be in a different part of the business. I think that's really important. Certainly I'll plug IANA, right? There's a ton of good information out there. If you're a member of IANA, or if you're a member of an industry source, I know you guys have Larry Gross on quite a bit. Larry has Intermodal in Depth. He puts out 55 pages of data every couple of weeks that is really powerful information. So shy of what I mentioned earlier, going out and learning about how the terminal works, how the experience of the driver impacts what you do, or what you do, and how it impacts the driver, I should say. Going out and learning about the data that's out there, the facts that are out in the industry, and how everything that we're doing impacts that. That I think is the best advice. But certainly, going out and networking, that is probably the number one thing, other than just going out and getting more knowledge. And that's probably the other thing that, if I go back early in my career, that if I would have realized it a little bit sooner, I'm going like 20 years ago, Nate, to give myself advice is, I think I had this expectation that I would go through training and I would learn so much and that would be all I needed. And until I got into like a mentorship situation, it was it was probably 6 or 8 months into my career, I realized, it's more on me to go acquire that information. Certainly I want to work for a company that gives me every opportunity to gain knowledge and experience. But I just had a hunger for data and information after that. And then I started going out and pursuing that on my own. And I think the folks that do that tend to separate themselves. And again, you don't have people out there in this industry that run businesses that haven't done that, right? They don't just walk in and they have all this experience. You go out and you gain it. And I think as a young professional that can be a miss, or maybe just a misconception that that all these folks didn't have to do that.
That makes sense. Let's dig a little bit deeper on the notion of mentoring and your personal role models. Talk to me a little bit about, your kind of experience in that kind of mentoring environment. Did you have a mentor? And how was that? How did that work for you?
Yeah. So the first couple of years, I mentioned I was about 6 to 8 months in when I started unofficially, leaning on folks that had experience that was, a few years ahead of myself. And so I had a mentor that was really my first boss. And I would say that throughout my career, it's kind of morphed into, different levels, I guess, of complexity of the mentor, kind of mentee mentor relationship. And so it was first just the basics about the business. We were running, relay shipments across the country where we would domicile drivers within 250-mile increments. And one driver is heading east and one driver is heading west, and you have to plan them accordingly, and we have to execute accordingly for them, the segment to work. And there was a lot of learning about myself, about the operation that I had to go through. And so it was really just elementary, answering questions, talking to me when I was frustrated, telling me, to stick with it, that kind of stuff. And I have a unique experience, I believe, being almost 20 years at one organization, and having, somebody like CL Werner that, started this company as a teenager, and grew it to what it is today. That guy's got the most amazing perspective of business, having, being an entrepreneur and starting with just a truck, all the way to growing a business. And he would tell you, he makes it sound really simple, but it's just about how you treat people, how you learn, how you interact. And, for us, and I think for the most part in transportation logistics, it's a driver. Whether it's intermodal, whether it's truckload, whether it's a home delivery, you gotta have drivers to make it work. And the foundation is really how you treat them, how you listen, how you change, that makes it all work. And so I think CL doesn't know he was a mentor to me, but certainly every time you listen to the guy, you learn something, and it's all really basic fundamentals. And then, as I've gotten further into my career, our CEO and chairman, Derek Leathers, he's probably one of the most interesting people I've ever met in my life. His perspective and his just passion for finding the best in everybody and finding the best in everything that we can do. It's motivating. I'd encourage folks, and I don't know that I'm going to go find another Derek out there that seems to make me want to run through a wall every time I walk out of his office. But, I certainly think that it has taught me to challenge the status quo. One of the things that I think I've learned, having been a mentee of his, is, you're going to have good days in this business. You're going to have average days, and you're going to have bad days. Right. And I think that's any industry, that's I think that is life. I think the focus is always how do you make the average and the bad days good. And I go back to what I said earlier. It's always being hungry for how do we change, how do we do things better, how do we work together, how do we motivate and empower ourselves and our peers. And that's probably the biggest thing that I've gleaned from listening to him over the years. So yeah, that was a little long-winded, but I hopefully covered the spectrum.
No, great stuff. And you really dialed into the importance of, being a proactive, being the captain of your own ship, and really making sure that you're looking for all the opportunities you can to learn, because that, the more you learn, the better you'll do, the farther you'll go, and the more your network will grow. And I think, there's absolutely a unifying theme there. And in terms of networking, do you have any tips or recommendations for folks that are starting out as to, kind of how to start that process and maintain a good and expanding professional network?
Yeah, I certainly think within your organization is step one. And that just could be in the group that you're in, that you start in. I mean, we have a program here. It's a mentorship program in logistics that you have to apply for. We've really expanded it over the last couple of years. You apply to be a mentee, you apply to be a mentor. We try to match people up with kind of cross-functional experience, whether that's somebody that might be on the truck brokerage side with somebody in intermodal or final mile. And, it could be location specific. We tend to not want to match folks up with somebody that's in Omaha with another person in Omaha. It might be in Atlanta and Omaha, something like that. Mm-hmm. But I'd really challenge, an individual to go out and find somebody at their organization that intrigues them, and it could be a peer, and it could be somebody in a different department. But I think that's step one. Certainly there's opportunity in social media. I mean, LinkedIn is a great tool. I certainly have met and interacted with people that are industry friends today, or people that we're now doing business with through networking in a forum like that. And then there's industry events. I mean, IANA puts on great events, several times a year, where you have the opportunity to go interact with people that are in the same industry. If you look today, you can't go a week, I don't think, without an industry event going on, whether it's intermodal specific or supply chain specific or something else. And so I think it's being able to put yourself out there and find folks that share the same passion with you, and even if they don't, people that you think are interesting, and going out and challenging yourself. I mean, I'm sure I'll talk about this again in the next 30 minutes, but I believe one of the most important ways to learn and grow is to be uncomfortable. And so when I started out 20 years ago, I take one of those personality tests and it tells me I'm an extrovert. 20 years ago, I would tell you I was not an extrovert. I was terrified to meet people. I was terrified to fail. Somehow I ended up in sales, and somehow I ended up, talking so much that people have to quiet me down now. But that is, again, as a young professional, it's daunting, right? It's daunting sometimes to go somewhere new and not know everything, and that can be intimidating. Or go out and meet new people, and those aren't things that you've done before in your life, or maybe that they aren't your strengths. But the more uncomfortable you get in learning a part of the business that you don't know about, or going out and meeting people, those are the most rewarding periods of your career. And I would tell you that every single time, going out in public speaking, or going out and meeting somebody you didn't know that maybe intimidated you for whatever reason, right? They just seem smart, they seem energetic, and maybe that's not your style, but you'll find that you get on the other side of that, and all of a sudden it's so rewarding and empowering that it becomes kind of part of what you do going forward. And so that's certainly what I would recommend.
No, that's some great advice, and especially that notion of, not doing what's comfortable, but doing the opposite and really kind of going at it from a different angle. I've got sort of a related question, but it's more about the organization. Werner's got a broad spectrum of services that you offer. You're national. You've got all sorts of different operating units that do very different things, but you're all kind of, there is a core notion to it all. How does your organization go about sharing information that it learns from one group across to the other? So, for example, over the road, how do you get insights from that team over into the intermodal team or the final mile team? There's a lot going on, obviously, and you've got folks out in very different parts of the industry, but all working together.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think that the biggest thing for us, regardless, I think it goes to, leadership as a whole. I go back to Derek, our executive team, and kind of how we've shaped our goals and our strategy for the future. It's to have consistency. So, we have core values. Some of our core values are safety, service, integrity, community. And with those core values, it really doesn't matter what part of the business we're talking about. Mm-hmm. Everything that we do here, there's a core value that's involved, right? So if it's, on the dedicated truckload side and intermodal, and we have a shared customer, we're going to talk about service, we're going to talk about safety, and that's a common theme. When we start strategizing, the core value is, at the center of the conversations that we have. Now, I mentioned before, service is our business, right? That is always going to be at the forefront with safety. It's nothing worth doing that, you could get hurt doing, right? That just is going to be a primary consistency across everything that we do, regardless of mode. And so I think having core values and a shared strategic organizational goal, that's at the forefront. Now, there's going to be divisional goals that attribute to that. And I think how you work across divisions is going to, contribute to how you achieve those goals outside of, what you're doing. So for example, if we have a goal of achieving kind of a single customer solution across all modes, technology plays a role into that, right? How are we working, with our truckload partners or with our final mile partners to make it easy for the customer to do business with us? That's become very important. People, right? Having shared goals for our people. When we walk in the door, if we're hiring, different personalities or different competencies, and having them march in separate directions, I don't think that's an efficient way to do things. And so, all the things I talk about kind of boil down to, if we have a shared strategic goal for the organization, if we have shared strategic goals for our operating division, and if we come to work every day with those core values and we stick to those, and then we empower our people, whether it's folks working at the warehouse, folks, our professional drivers or office associates, and we empower them to do great things, and we hire the right competencies with those folks that we're empowering. I think those are the keys to success for us.
That's really interesting, especially when you consider, all the things that your company does, and all the things that you've done. And I guess that leads to a question of sort of you and intermodal. I know you started out, you mentioned in truckload, but do you feel like you chose intermodal or intermodal chose you?
I definitely chose intermodal. I go back to my time from when I started out in operations. I don't think I knew what intermodal was. I was managing professional drivers. I was planning shipments for our professional drivers. It really wasn't until I got out of our truckload division and to Chicago that things changed for me. So, I mean, if you can't, I don't think you can go very far anywhere, 100 miles around the city of Chicago and not see an intermodal train, every 10 or 15 minutes. And so I developed a passion for, how it worked. I think this business as a whole is very, very complex, truckload, regardless of mode, but I mean, intermodal is a complex business. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of variables that have to be executed very, very well just to deliver one shipment. And that was really, really fascinating to me, and I think that it's just been for me, solving a puzzle, whether it was load planning, solving I think a more complex puzzle when you plan intermodal shipments or plan intermodal networks, that to me is very, very fascinating. It's a challenge. And, I think to this day, I've been an intermodal since 2014. I learned something every day. I think that's probably another, maybe misconception of a career path is, you're never done learning. You're never done experiencing things, whether you're on day one or year 20. You're going to walk in and you're going to learn. And the minute you stop learning, you stop innovating, you stop doing things differently, then I think you're going to get passed up. And so, yeah, intermodal is so fun and it's so complex and I love the variables that make it work. So I definitely chose it. I didn't choose transportation initially, but I definitely chose intermodal.
That's great to hear. I had the great opportunity of talking with our chairman, Shelley Austin from Intech Freight and Logistics a little while ago. And one of the things that we were talking about was her passion for intermodal. And a lot of it comes from, she's obviously she's a problem solver, and she's got, a crazy skill for looking at wacky situations that seem like they can't be solved and figuring out a solution for her customer. And I think that's it's almost like Tetris in the real world with, you've got trains and international boxes and domestic boxes and, chassis challenges. And, how do you optimize, the ability to do truckload and intermodal and cross docking and warehousing and mixing up all of the pieces, because she said as well that the customer ask is evolving. The customers are getting more and more sophisticated, and their supply chain networks are getting more and more complicated. So they need partners like Intech Freight and Logistics and Werner Logistics to help them solve those problems. And it's not just a one size fits all. It's it's almost like they're all snowflakes, right? Everybody's got a unique challenge to solve. In your experience, has there been anything that on your career path that you were like, it was like sort of this, oh, wow, like I really need to do this, or I really need to, change the way I do something? Was there one of those sort of, oh, wow moments for you?
Yeah. I mentioned it earlier. I think I'd probably reiterate, like at the foundation, it's understanding how everything works. So talking to a driver, what do they experience at the terminal? What do they come across every day that challenges them? I'd probably say the first time I went out to Long Beach, to the port there, and I saw really how complex this business is. I live in Omaha, Nebraska, and we've got you got the Council Bluffs ramp here that isn't very daunting, and then you go to Long Beach and you've got this massive ocean terminal and all the infrastructure around it in the Los Angeles market that is is significant. And, for me, it was probably those two things. Now I would probably, I would agree with your previous comment about just the problem solving. And, you get past learning how the foundation works with drivers and terminals, and railroads or trains, and all the different variables, right? I didn't learning about flat cars and containers and how the balance can work in a certain market, or how what we do influences that. That's certainly all things that you learn early on, but then you start interacting with customers, and understanding the different nuances about their business. And I quickly get past how I pick up the load and I get it to the terminal, but we missed the rail cut, and my customer needs this in 4 days, and if I miss a rail cut, then I'm late. And being able to solution problems with customers, and how everything that we do, from maybe their vendor, from their facility, that affects a pickup, or a delivery, and how what we do affects the railroad, and how what they can do affects us, and all the schedules that go into coordinating something successfully, or all the variables that go into coordinating successfully. That's probably the biggest moment for me. And I mentioned it before, just the complexity of intermodal.
Yeah.
You see a drayman, you see a container and a chassis, and a crane taking a container off a flat car and putting on a chassis. But there's so many things that go into doing that successfully. And then service is our business. I mentioned that a few times, how it affects a customer, or how what they do affects us. That's probably the biggest eye opener for me, is just understanding at each point in the supply chain, or each point in the transaction, how what we do can affect the outcome.
Yeah, it is remarkable how, the more that you dig, the more you learn, right? Like the more complex it seems to get with every turn, but it is exciting and dynamic. Absolutely. In terms of, if you had like a do-over to do, is there a particular thing that you use your do-over for in your career to maybe change a path you took, or something along those lines?
I feel like that's a trap question. Like, if I say I want to be an NFL quarterback or something like that, I'm going to get myself in trouble. No, I think if I talked about the mentorship aspect, or challenging myself earlier on in my career, my expectations were so different than what this industry was.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it took me probably 6 to 9 months to really understand that, what was really going on. So I wouldn't per se change that necessarily. It would probably be around, maybe the goals I set for myself early on. It took the interaction that I had with, my first boss to really motivate me I have to set goals, right? And my first goal is going to be, here's where I want to be in my career a year from now. And, what do I have to do to achieve those goals? Right. Mm-hmm. So you have this big macro goal, and what are the 3 little micro goals that I have to achieve to get there? It was probably, maybe a year and a half before I realized that, the more I set goals and the more passionate I am about achieving them, I think the more successful I can be. So it was probably, maybe I'd set goals a little bit sooner, and I'd hold myself to that from day one, because I think if you do that, you find that you have a fire every single day when you walk in. You're walking in and you got this bulletin board material that says, here's what I'm going to do, whether it's a goal, whether it's a strategy. They're today they're one and the same, but just being passionate about goal setting. It probably took me a year and a half to really get it. And then once I did, I was hooked. I still to this day. I mean, they're on my whiteboard. One goal gets accomplished, and we add another one, and we strategize, and we talk about how we're going to achieve them. And just like core values, they're part of our daily conversation. We're going to be safe, we're going to service our customer, and these are the goals we're going to achieve, and here's how we're going to achieve them. And so it'd probably be just maybe understanding that a little bit earlier on.
Yeah, and that really resonates with me. I'll say that I currently work with somebody that I consider in many ways a mentor to me, Beth, who puts on these webinars because she is a project manager through and through, and she's really taught me the importance of mapping from your goal back to where you start so that you know how to get there. Because, sometimes journeys without any defined, endpoint can be fun, but when you're talking about a business decision, it's really good to have a goal and then a plan to execute on it. So I definitely that absolutely resonates with me, and I can tell the folks he's not there right now, but Nate has a really cool office with a massive whiteboard, like the entire wall is a whiteboard, and I think we were all like, "Ooh, that's a great idea," to help kind of get those ideas out and down and captured and help move them forward. In terms of advice that you might give to new folks that are coming into either coming right out of school or coming out of high school, and they want to get started in intermodal, what kind of goals or not goals but advice would you say for them to kind of think about as they get started?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of spin through a few. I mean, it's obviously networking, and we've talked about that already. Ask questions. We just talked about goal setting. I think the quicker you adapt to learning the business, gaining knowledge, and then using that knowledge to strategize, goal setting, I think, becomes contagious, in my opinion. I'd start out by networking and educating yourself, learn the business, set goals, certainly, the relationship aspect of who you work with, whether it's a mentor that you have at your organization, or somebody that that maybe isn't necessarily that somebody that you're working with, and be inquisitive, get knowledge, ask questions, embrace change. I mean, there's going to be, I think that if I were to tell you that the folks that don't succeed in this industry, certainly, any industry is not the right fit for everybody, but if you can't embrace change in transportation logistics, I mean, you're probably going to have a tough time. And I think that's the case in a lot of businesses. You have to be able to be adaptable and be comfortable with change, because change, a lot of times, for whether it's personal life or whether it's business, change can be uncomfortable. I think as human beings, we like to have things be consistent and fairly normal. And when they aren't, it's uncomfortable. But, I think if you're going to adapt to what's going on in an economy or what's going on in a business, and you set goals, and some of the things that you need to do to achieve them are uncomfortable, I think there's folks that are going to embrace that and excel, and there's folks that won't. And I think the better you get at doing that, and by the way, that's an acquired taste. That is not something that is that you're walking in as a young professional able to do. You can get better at adapting to change by educating yourself. And so that would be probably the best advice I could give is there's a lot of information out there. Go get it, be comfortable with change. Some of it's gonna be a success, and some of it you're just going to learn and adapt and move forward. And you're going to have good days with change, and you're going to have bad days with change, and you got to be able to just overcome. And I think you can be successful if you do that.
you are definitely a tried and true voice of that, because I was just sort of doing the math in my head. So during your tenure in Intermodal, you experienced the labor shutdown in 2014 on the West Coast, right when you started, and then you experienced the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, and the sort of flat line that kind of came out of that crater. And then you've experienced the pandemic and the trade war. So you've been through three of the most significant challenges to the industry in recent history. So I think you've got a good perspective on how to weather that and do that in a really dynamic company that is it's stuck to its roots, but it's also grown in very different ways to meet its need, the needs of the customer, really, kind of like you said. It seems like really go back to that core value proposition that you have there at Werner of serving those customers and meeting those core values to really deliver on the big picture. Well, we're about to wrap up here. But I do want to thank you, Nate, for spending time with us. I think that it's been really insightful. I've learned a lot, and I think you've given me a lot to think about, and I'm sure you've given a lot of our visitors, our attendees today, a lot to think about as they either look back on their career or look, sort of across their career or forward to it, because we've got a very broad spectrum of folks on today. And I'm really glad that they joined us, and I'm glad that you were able to come on and share your perspectives. I do just want to kind of give you an opportunity to say anything else that you wanted to before we jump into a little bit of housekeeping for folks.
I appreciate the time to come on today. I mean, I think certainly, we're in a transitionary period relative to what's going on in the industry. We're coming off what feels like a pretty big cliff, and I think because it was. I mean, we were in a couple of years of some pretty unprecedented demand, and we're back, I think, to a little bit of normalization prior to that. And I think this is where it's kind of time to go back and sharpen the tool set and make sure that we're continuing to stick to what we do well. I go back, and I think if you're trying to go innovate and do different things at your business, stick to what your core, right? Your core values, stick to your core strategy. Make sure you're focused on the customer relationship, your people, safety, and then certainly how you interact with your partners, whether it be a railroad or a carrier, and stick to those core values and strategies. And I think you'll find yourself in a good position when, the demand, where supply and demand is today. When that changes, I think you're in a good position to capitalize.
That's terrific wisdom, especially for folks who are very nervous about the, how to just, figure out this crazy time that we're in right now, which is, like you said, it's sort of unprecedented. It's like we've just come off a cliff of demand, for sure. Well, listen, folks, I would love to see you all at the business meeting. Nate mentioned that we do a number of events. The first one of the year, the business meeting, is coming up May 8th through the 10th in Oak Brook, Illinois. You can still register for that. Just head on over to intermodal.org and go to events. And there's all the information there. You can see the program, what's happening, when it's happening, and go ahead and register. I think we've still got some slots for the golf event, so don't sleep on that. It's always a lot of fun. And for other upcoming educational opportunities, head on over to our website, intermodal.org, go to upcoming education, and take a look at the rest of the 2023 Advancing Intermodal Virtual Education Program. I think there's a lot of interesting things in there. Nate pointed out the sessions, Intermodal Analyze, that we do with Larry Gross every other month. There's a number of other interesting educational opportunities for folks wherever they are in their career. So anything else you have questions about, go ahead and shoot us an email at info@intermodal.org. And with that, I will thank Nate. I will thank all of you who joined us today for this Advancing Intermodal webinar from IANA, the connecting force behind intermodal freight.